Georgia O'Connor here. Big up Julius. Ring IQ. Welcome to the relay.
Welcome to the relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. It's official. Shakur S. Stevenson will take on Edwin De Los Santos. They have agreed to a deal for a November 16th fight in Las Vegas for the vacant WBC lightweight title, sources told ESPN. The bout will headline a top-ranked boxing on ESPN card on Thursday, 3 days before Formula One debuts in Las Vegas. They have managed to save the date, and
the show must go on.
The show's going on without Frank Martin. What other gory details have been brought to the light as a result of that fight's collapse? Frank Martin stated, "To my fans, I wanted this fight just like y'all, and I never asked for no 50-50 split." To which Shakur Stevenson replied, "You asked me in my DMs. I explained to you all the numbers, and you still asked for half of the money. Stop the cap."
What makes Frank Martin look bad here is that the World Boxing Council are the ones who announced that they had agreed to a deal. The World Boxing Council who brought both teams together.
Remember, they're the ones who ordered the fight, they're the ones who scheduled the purse bid if a deal wasn't reached, and they're the ones who called off that purse bid when, according to them,
a deal was reached.
And this isn't like Dan Raphael or Mike Kopinger giving you an inside scoop via their sources. This is from the World Boxing Council themselves.
Just as good as hearing it from the horse's mouth. They're the ones that ordered the fight. They're the ones that brought these two teams together. And they're the ones that had correspondence with both of them, both TGB and Top Rank.
What really makes Frank look bad in all of this is that it seems like they were all on board, and in the 13th hour, he got cold feet. He decided to pull out.
Say it's about the money.
If there was any issue about the splits or who's getting what dollar amount, if it's about the money, then why did they agree to terms? And it does seem like they agreed to terms, at least according to the World Boxing Council. Now, Shakur Stevenson yesterday hinted that Edwin De Los Santos would be next. He stated, "This fighter's got more heart than the rest of them. And truthfully speaking, I believe he is a better fighter than the bitch who got cold feet and pulled out. But look, you press up on me, I will answer the phone."
Talking about Edwin.
You press up on me, I will answer the phone call. I don't duck no smoke. Let's go.
Shakur Stevenson posted this to his Twitter account late yesterday.
As more of the varying grotesqueries of the now defunct Frank Martin fight were made available by way of Dake Jonovan, who said purse split would have been 60-40 Shakur had it gone to a bid. "I'm doing my best to stay out of this, but Martin's team could have pushed for it, go back to purse bid if he felt disrespected at any point in the past week."
Because the fight was ordered. If Frank Martin really wanted the fight,
right?
If he wanted to fight with Shakur, but he was unhappy with certain aspects of the deal, he could have pushed for a purse bid.
Do you see that? 60-40. He was going to get 40% of the pot.
If he would have pushed for a purse bid, he would have got 40% of the overall pot.
So the question then becomes, if he stood to make 40% of the overall pot in the event it goes to a purse bid, why didn't he push for one?
Because he didn't want the fight.
Understand that if it goes to a purse bid, anybody can bid on the fight. Top Rank,
yeah.
PBC.
If you feel undervalued and you feel that you don't like what Top Rank's offering you, then you go to a purse bid and let your own people put up the money. Let them pay for the show.
Well, that's the problem.
What is?
They weren't going to. The PBC weren't going to bankroll this show. They weren't going to pay Shakur Stevenson a multi-million-dollar purse and Frank Martin a multi-million-dollar purse for this fight.
Oh.
That's why Top Rank was in charge. That's why it was Top Rank's money paying for the show.
The PBC weren't going to break the bank just to do this show. They don't normally spend that much money on Frank Martin and his fights. So what the hell makes you think they were going to break the bank to do this one?
And more interesting is that while Frank Martin is supposed to be a man-down promotions fighter, man-down promotions, quote-unquote, look at who is handling the negotiations on his behalf. It's not
Errol.
man-down promotions there. It says TGB, Tom Brown.
Man Down Promotions is supposed to be Errol Spence's promotional company. Frank Martin is supposed to be one of Errol's fighters, but it doesn't say Man Down Promotions there, does it? It says Tom Brown. It says TGB.
So what good is Man Down Promotions if they don't have a network deal, if they don't have a broadcast partner, a broadcast budget to do shows throughout the year? Man Down Promotions seems to me to be little more than just another dummy company.
It's just a name.
You can't think of them the same way you'd think of a Top Rank or a Golden Boy, a Matchroom.
You can't.
The truth is, the longer you look at it, the more obvious it becomes that Frank Martin didn't want this fight, in spite of it being for a title, in spite of it being for a lot of money, more than he makes per fight, in spite of it being the most high-profile fight he would have ever been in, he didn't want it.
And it is that simple.
Those wanting to run interference for Frank Martin, i.e. those attempting to save face for him, they don't want it to be that simple, but it is.
He didn't want to fight.
He didn't want the fight. And the only hope for him now that he's walked away from a world title opportunity and a career high purse, is that he walked away with purpose, that he would have walked away with good reason. And the only
other fight at this weight that's bigger, that would be bigger than the one he was supposed to have with Shakur, would have to be a Gervonta Davis fight. So that's saying that unless he's fighting Gervonta Davis next, this is a stone cold duck.
Now, as far as Shakur Stevenson versus Edwin De Los Santos, the old saying goes, be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. And for a little over a year now, Edwin De Los Santos has been calling for a Shakur Stevenson fight. Well, now he's got it. I said it before and I'll say it again. This whole thing between Shakur and Edwin reminds me of what we saw a couple of years ago between Felix Diaz and Terence Crawford.
Felix Diaz of the Dominican Republic, the same way that Edwin is from the Dominican Republic. Felix Diaz, who was calling for a Crawford fight,
same way that Edwin's been calling for a Stevenson fight. History repeats itself, as they say. And what did we see when Felix Diaz finally got in the ring with Terence?
one-sided beatdown.
It's more or less what I'm expecting once Edwin is in the ring with Shakur. A one-sided beatdown.
A lopsided fight.
Credit to Edwin for stepping up to the plate, stepping up when Frank Martin chose to shrink in the moment. I've got nothing against Edwin, but I don't have any illusions about him either, or this fight.
Might look all right on your side of things over there with those PBC fighters.
You're dealing with Top Rank now. The gold standard, the cream of the crop.
Go fighting Shakur Stevenson.
Not one of those little PBC kids.
Glad they were able to save the day.
And you see what a difference a day makes. You see how easy things can be when both sides want the fight.
When both guys want to fight.
Do you see how easy that was?
Yeah, man. Ain't mad about it, bro. I don't know if Danny said anything to spark that. I don't know, there's a few things. One, you didn't beat up a champion, bro.
Errol Spence Jr. going into that fight was in possession of 3 of the 4 major alphabet titles. Keith Thurman, former champion, contends that Terence, in spite of that, he didn't beat a champion.
What's funny is that that's the same version of Errol that Keith was waiting for. That's the same version of Errol that Keith was waiting to fight.
After things fell apart late last year, between Terence and Errol, that's the same Errol that Keith was going to fight.
And if he had?
If he won, do you think he'd be saying this? If he were the one that beat Errol Spence Jr.?
You didn't beat up a champion, bro. I don't think that Errol Spence would beat Sean Porter. Okay.
Is that why you wasted most of last year? Is that why you waited to fight him? Because you were waiting to fight the same version of Errol that Terence fought.
God bless you, kid. You're blessed. Everybody knows in boxing that it's timing. I don't really like to talk really down on fighters and take away. I hate people who just treat people like, oh, this guy's washed up now, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of stuff being said about me and my career.
What does Keith Thurman expect people to say in reference to his career?
What?
What does he expect people to say?
What?
He took approximately 2 years off after the Danny Garcia fight, 2 more years off after the Pacquiao fight. He's coming up on 2 years of inactivity.
Again.
While he talks down Terence Crawford, tears down his victory over Errol Spence Jr., what does Keith expect people to say about him?
But do I still think you just beat up almost nobody? You didn't beat up a real champion, kid.
I'm fairly confident that if it were Keith that beat that same version of Errol and not Terence, this isn't what Keith would be saying. This isn't how he would describe that fighter. He'd talk him up. He'd say he was the best thing since sliced bread to indirectly glorify himself.
But because Terence beat him to the punch, it doesn't count. Errol wasn't a champion.
This is a pathetic display from Keith Thurman.
It is.
He is seeming more and more a has-been the more interviews he does.
You know, everybody knows you put Thurman in the ring on that same night. Thurman wiped Spence, that Errol.
Everybody doesn't know, Keith. Everybody doesn't know that you would have beat that version of Errol because you fought a 40-year-old Manny Pacquiao and got sat on your back pocket in the first round. You actually got one of the most sought-after fights in the welterweight division, and you screwed the pooch.
Passing of the torch fight, he drops the torch.
Gets dropped in the first round, and we're supposed to believe that he would have beat the version of Errol that Terence beat. I'm not so sure.
You know why?
Tell you why. It's because the only fighter who's more injury-prone and more inactive than Errol Spence is Keith Thurman.
Mr. Glass, as I like to call him.
But we're supposed to take this from him?
Gets wiped by many people. Okay?
No, it's not okay. It's not okay for you to try and take credit for someone else's victory.
You least of all.
Remember that Keith Thurman has actually had access to Errol Spence Jr. for years. Many years. And many years ago, Errol Spence Jr. wanted to fight Keith Thurman.
Years before the car accident.
Let's get it straight. If you're diminishing the version of Errol Spence Jr. that Terence Crawford fought, it reflects poorly on you because you could have fought a better version of Errol before the car accident. A younger version of Errol when he wanted to fight you, but you didn't want to fight him.
The other day I asked, here on the channel, was it really necessary for Keith Thurman to take a 2-year hiatus from the sport after the Danny Garcia fight? Was that really necessary? Because he lost all momentum after that.
Think about the car accident that Errol Spence Jr. was in, how horrific that was. And think about how, in spite of that, he came back in a little over a year's time. Not 2 years. He wasn't gone that long.
Got into a car accident in October of 2019. By December of 2020, he was back. He had the Danny Garcia fight.
Keith Thurman was out much longer than that, for what I can only describe as a severe case of tennis elbow.
Just cut the crap.
You can't criticize Terence Crawford for the version of Spence that he fought when you could have fought a younger version of Spence and you didn't want to. In fact, you were trying to fight the same version of Errol that Terence fought, but he beat you to the punch.
And this is just a case of sour grapes.
You're that big a has-been that you don't even realize how cringeworthy you sound tearing his victory down when you were trying to fight the same guy.
And if you had fought him and you had beat him, you wouldn't be saying this.
Let's get it straight. Keith Thurman got beat by Manny Pacquiao, and Manny Pacquiao got beat by Yordenis Ugas, who had already been beat by Sean Porter and got beat by Errol Spence.
And you know who beat Sean Porter and Errol Spence?
Terence Crawford beat Sean Porter and Errol Spence. He knocked them both out.
It's illusion that if Terence Crawford doesn't set some time aside to give Keith Thurman an opportunity, something's missing from his resume.
Bullshit.
Fucking bullshit.
Keith Thurman got beat by Manny Pacquiao, who got beat by Jeff Horn before that. You know who beat Jeff Horn? Terence Crawford.
That's who.
How do you sit there with a straight face and criticize Terence for fighting the version of Errol that he fought when you were trying to do the same thing?
How?
Keith's real problem is he's not quite ready to call it a career yet. He wants one more fight, one more big money fight. He's ready to cash out and bow out, but nobody worth anything is giving him the time of day, leaving him to contend with the Jaron Ennises and Amontes Stanioneses of the world. High-risk, low-reward opponents.
Who probably beat him, but he won't make much money.
Thus, he wants to cash out with Terence Crawford. While he's buzzing and talked about right now, that's what he would prefer.
But Terence is only doing to you what you did to him years ago.
You didn't have any energy for Terence because you were focused on Manny. Well, he doesn't have any energy for you because he's got an Errol Spence Jr. rematch lined up. And after that, he wants the winner of Canelo versus Charlo.
Just doing to you what you did to him.
In better fashion, nobody likes their own medicine.
Least of all, a has-been. That's all it is.
Per a tweet from Mike Kopinger, Errol Spence Jr. exercised the rematch clause for a return bout with Terence Crawford and said afterwards he'd like to fight at 154, but it remains to be seen what weight they will meet at. Contractually, the winner of the first fight picks the weight for the rematch. If Crawford wants to stay at 147, Spence might have to make some concessions to move the weight.
Terence did say he'd be open to having the rematch at 154 because it was a difficult cut for him as well.
I would actually prefer to see the second fight at junior middleweight because that removes any and all excuses Errol's supporters are making. Errol himself isn't making any excuses, but that's not stopping his fans from doing so. For that reason, I would actually prefer to see the rematch at junior middleweight.
The issue is, if you do it up there are no alphabet titles on the line, and 2 out of 4 sanctioning bodies already have mandatory challengers installed.
The WBC and the WBO already have interim champions installed, Tim Tszyu and Brian Mendoza, who are going to be meeting up with each other later on this year in October.
Jermell Charlo is still this division's undisputed champion.
The night of the Canelo fight later on this month, the WBO title will be vacated as a result of his non-compliance to satisfy his mandatory challenger in Tim Tszyu.
I wonder if, say, the WBA or the IBF won't make some titles available should Spence versus Crawford 2 land at junior middleweight. It's not like Jermell is coming back. Pretending that he is a formality.
He's going all the way up there to 168. Win or lose, it's not likely that he boils back down to 154 at his age, at this stage in his career, given all the money he stands to make with Canelo. Win or lose. So why not make those titles available to Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr., either the WBA title
or the IBF, or both?
Commercially, I don't think the second fight is going to be as successful as the first one was, given how lopsided the first one was.
The mystery has been dispelled. It's all but gone. We now know what would happen if you put Terence and Errol in the same ring with each other. We got our answer.
The only reason they're doing a second fight is because Errol Spence Jr. has a rematch clause, and I understand that. I understand he has a contractual right to a rematch, but that doesn't make it as hot a ticket.
It's not as hot a ticket as the first fight was.
For me and my money, the most appeal there is in a rematch is doing it at 154 and killing what remaining narratives are being propagated by the usual suspects, pointing to the weight of the first contest, the weight of their initial meeting, what was an undisputed welterweight title fight.
The same people that were carrying on for 5 years about how Errol Spence Jr. would annihilate Terence Crawford, that he was too big and he was too strong.
All the way up until fight week, all the way up until Terence Crawford climbed in that ring and kicked his fucking ass.
Do it at 154.
Kick it again, and kick it again at 154, so they don't have any more excuses to make. It's a wonder they're making as many as they're making, since Errol isn't doing that. Why are you?
Because they feel stupid for talking that much shit for the last 5 years.
Among the most annoying faction of fans I've seen in recent memory, Errol Spence Jr.'s supporters.
As vocal as they are.
You can imagine their horror as they watched Errol get beaten from pillar to post.
Reality and their understanding of the world of boxing was shaken.
Shake it again. Do it at 54. Oh, you're saying it was the weight, because Errol was weight drained. Then do the second fight at 154 and see if that helps. I bet it won't.